Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
Crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Well, Dave, thanks for joining us on the show. Dave Hodges is the host of the Common Sense Show and runs the CommonSenseShow.com, where he put out at least one article a day, and just you've been on the show with us many times, good friend of the show, and I really appreciate you coming on to co-host with me today. We've got just so much going on. Maybe for some of our newer listeners or people that are just tuning in for the first time, give a little background as to what you were doing before radio, what brought you to radio, and just give us a little backstory there.
I was just a happy college basketball coach. I was an educator, spent a little time as a mental health therapist, and life was good. I mean, I was enjoying my life, and it was going well. And then John McCain and his friends decided they wanted to steal every home in my rural community, including my own. And I got involved in the fight, ended up being the spokesperson by quite accident. And I discovered that there was a whole lot wrong, a lot more than people trying to steal my home. So I was offered a radio spot as a result of going on just one gentleman's show several times. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, Dave, we certainly seem to be living in very historic times, and I know you've been covering Jade Helm just as long as we have, and really since the beginning that we started hearing about it. And you've got such great information coming in. I noticed that there seems to be some real parallels between my contacts with the information I'm getting and what you're getting as well. And I got to tell you, things are getting a little scary. More and more information coming out there. More of my contacts are saying it's not a matter of if this is going to happen or if it's a reality, but really when. And we've been talking about this red list. You just had put out a new article today talking about the Jade Helm red list and when it's time to come. We're time to run. And I got to tell you that I got some information from a contact, inside contact. I won't get into who, but someone that is very well trusted. I know he's very well wired into the patriot and military communities, both on many levels, and has been involved with a lot of what's been happening lately. And he sent me a very disturbing text talking about, and I'll actually just read part of it here. Let's see, I'm sorry, it wasn't a text. It was actually on Facebook as a message. But basically stating that an extremely trusted contact has confirmed that they're going to have a full collapse / police state this fall, followed by a night of the long knives. It's going to occur on resistance leaders and to prepare accordingly. And that kind of coincides with a lot of what you're saying. Can you talk about what you've been hearing and what's the latest update that you've been getting as far as Jade Helm 15?
Well, I don't have a specific time frame as your source has given you. But I've been told that when it happens, it's going to happen very quickly. It'll come like a thief in the night. When they come do the extractions of people that they want to get out of the way, they can't have people warning each other. So they have to coordinate these extractions. They have to do them at the same time. And they need to do them under stealth. And I think we're going to see cell phone blocks, internet blocks. I think we'll see a temporary suspension of communications during that time. So I can't call you, and you can't call Jim White and warn, hey, the enemy is at the gate, and they're coming in through the door. So that's one thing I know that's coming. And I happen to have had several conversations with my sources through the years that when they come do the extractions always precede martial law. And when they come do the extractions, what kinds of people they're going to be looking for. And I published today in my article, a pretty comprehensive list, but not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more that I could have added. But effectively, they're looking for people who can organize, and particularly organize militarily. If you're a veteran and you've got counterinsurgency skills because you've been a 3-tour duty veteran in Afghanistan or Iraq, you know how counterinsurgency works because you've been fighting against it for a very long time. So your skills would be invaluable in playing the other side of the fence and helping American citizens fight back and using guerrilla warfare tactics, counterinsurgency. So those are people they're going to want to extract. They're also going to want to extract military leadership with combat experience and people that could basically administrate an army. It's one thing to raise a crowd to fight. It's another thing to go into the next step and be an organized fighting force. And a good number of those 260-plus command officers that Obama fired have skills. They have combat skills, but they also have military unit organizational skills that are invaluable. Those people will be targeted. Now, a lot of people think that people like you and I will be targeted very quickly, and I really don't think so, because if they want to just get us out of the way, all they got to do is pull the plug on the Internet, block communications. Now, there's an exception to that. The caveat is this. You don't have to listen to Steve Quayle very long or Doug Hagman very long to know that they have extensive contacts. Those people are just as dangerous as the contacts because they know basically dangerous information. So I do expect some members of the media to be at the front line of extractions, but not most of them. Because I have really good military sources, I fully expect to be targeted. And so the key, Jason, is this. How do you recognize when this is going to go live? And is there anything you can do to be out of harm's way? And then tomorrow I'm writing about how to evade capture once you're on the run. And you have to have a full understanding of the technology, and I'm going to be going through that tomorrow. But the article I wrote today basically asked the question, are you on the Jade Helm red list? And the list I just ran off here is not comprehensive, but it's a good indicator. If you're to lead people, and you have the ability to lead people into action and make them act, then you will be a target. You can count that. You'll be in the first wave, phase one. So I think Jason, what we're ultimately looking at is once you determine if you're a target or not, most of you will certainly be a phase 2 target. And I should probably mention this. I didn't talk about this again too much in depth in the article because I've mentioned it so many times before. But all of us have a threat matrix score from the NSA. And no one knows, what that score is or when you cross the line to where you're dangerous to your government. And you know as well as I do, they have color-coded it red and they've color-coded it blue. Phase 2 would be blue, and they want to get people out of the way. So if you say, well, okay, I'm not a military leader, I don't have counterinsurgency skills, I don't have high-level contacts, okay, I'm probably not a phase 1 guy, and you might be right. But phase 2 will be just as deadly, because as soon as they get the leaders out of the way, phase 2 will be about mass relocation. That's when we hear all this talk about, sending people off to FEMA camps. That's when this happens in phase 2. And phase 2 happens pretty quickly after you get the leaders out. Usually within a few days, if you look at past history.
Wow, just a few days.
So listen, every source I talk to, every single source says the same thing. This is going to come down like a thief in the night. It's going to happen so quickly it'll make your head swim. So they can't give us time to react. It's got to be shock and awe. And this is the way I see the scenario going down. For your listening audience, and I covered this before, Judicial Watch has established the fact through government documents and Mexican government documents that there's an ISIS base on the other side of the border near El Paso, Texas.
Absolutely, yes.
Also are on the verge of economic collapse. I published an article 2 days ago that showed the S&P drop-off. I showed the Baltic Dry Index drop-off, which is really the best indicator of economic unemployment.
That's the best one, right?
We're in big trouble. And when the economy, goes to pot, that's when I believe under that chaos that ISIS will begin targeted strikes. We're going to be seeing shock and awe. And at that same time, we're going to be seeing the extractions. And then very quickly, The government will try to trick you into, hey, come to our FEMA camp. We got food, we got water. But if it doesn't work, they'll just do the mass relocations, and that's where the UN troops come in.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's probably a certain segment of the U.S. military, like with Katrina and whatnot, that's willing to partake in some of this. But the vast majority, I don't know if they would be a part of it. So I think foreign troops would have to be part of the equation in order for it to really work in that type of manner.
To the point. Early on, there won't be any equivocation for following orders. But let me tell you what else I've learned. I've got two military sources who were at one time very high up in the military organization, and they cut their teeth. Both of them cut their teeth in special forces in the early part of their careers. And they talk to people in Jade Helm, regularly talk to people in Jade Helm on the sly. And what they have told me, and I've heard this from two people independent of each other, and they don't even know the other is talking to me. But what both people have told me is that Jade Helm leadership does not fully understand the operational nature of their mission. They think a lot is wrong. There's a lot of inconsistencies. They don't think they're training to go to the Middle East at all. Some speculate that they're going to be dropping into Kiev and conquering that because they're doing urban training. Some others think that it's going to be martial law against the American people, and they're going to do dissident extraction. There's a division, but they're guessing. The Jade Helm drill is heavily compartmentalized, so much so that the leadership doesn't know what's going on. And I'll tell you, I know why this is true. If you told your leadership in Jade Helm, you're going to be training for the day that you're going to go in and extract Americans with deadly force if need be, and then phase 2 will be mass relocation, and we're going to use foreign troops to help you accomplish that, you would have widespread dissension through the ranks. No one's going to buy into this. But if you put them in an immediate yes or no decision-making situation, most soldiers are going to follow orders, at least initially. So this is why they're basically keeping their operational mission long-term secret from the Jade Helm leadership in the hope to get as much compliance for as long as they can before the foreign troops have got to move in and take over.
Now, it seems like there's already some people that are, at least one person we heard about today, a Marine, decided that he wasn't going to be taking part of it. There was anonymously from the Operation Jade Helm and Beyond inbox, got a phone call from my nephew who has been in the Marine Corps for 16 years. He's a Force Recon Scout Sniper with 7 deployments under his belt. He called and said he had dropped all of his stuff at the feet of his CO and walked away. He's headed home to Mississippi. Don't know any of the details. He just told me, Uncle, I ain't going to do this stuff to American people. So it seems like there are already some people saying that this is not going to happen. That they're not going to partake in it. But again, I don't know. There were some documents that you talked about, I want to say, on one of your articles yesterday. Can you tell us about this document that's come to light and how it pertains to Jade Helm?
Well, it's an RSOF document, Army Special Operations Forces, and the document was published in September. One of my sources had a hold of it. I should clarify this. One of my sources contacts, and he had a hold of it, and he and I began, some intermittent conversations, and he shared with me some of the information. You could not get this document back in September and October when it was published. And so he would share with me certain operational features like the use of foreign troops. And that's clearly established in the article that I wrote 2 days ago in this document. This document only came to light publicly somewhere around 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then only selected people had it. I received it 2 weeks ago in its entirety, but you always have to be leery. And let me just say this as a warning to everyone who starts investigating stuff out there, and we all should be. You could be given false information, and then you could be discredited, and then everything you say after that, no one will believe you. So what I did is I did about a 10-day comprehensive study of this document, and what I tried to do was do what we call external validity checks. I took facts within this RSOF document, and I compared it to documents that we know are about martial law, like FM 3-39.4, and I started looking for correspondences, correlations between operational mission statements and goals. And they're all through there. It's incredible. I was into this about 2-3 days, and I said, yeah, it's really clear. but I wanted to lock it down. What I published in the article was probably about 25% of the connections that I made. I mean, people don't want to read a 5,000-word article, so I cut it down for public consumption, but I had a whole lot more correlations that I was able to establish between the RSOF document and comparing it to documents that we already know are related to martial law and foreign UN troop mercenary usage in this country to subjugate Americans. So the document basically tells us that they're going to do what they call surgical strikes. And they're using special operations. So you have to keep the context of who the targeted audience is for this document. The document's written for Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and so forth. It's not written for your average soldier, your F-16 pilot. It's written for guys that rappel in the middle of the night, or they come in by raft to a combat area, and they do pre-invasion strategy techniques. They'll try to take out command and control with delayed detonation. They'll extract and kidnap or assassinate key figures that will harm the leadership of the enemy that they'll be fighting presumably the next day. And this is who this document's meant for. So in the document, they talk about they're going to use surgical strikes. Well, what is a surgical strike? Well, if you go into a neighborhood and you're targeting 3 people, that's a surgical strike to this particular population in this context. They're telling you right there, in my opinion, and military people agree with me on this, this isn't just about kidnapping and taking people to Guantanamo or a FEMA camp. This is about death squad. They're going to go in and take people out. There is no question. And I don't mean they're going to take out the resistors. I'm talking they're going to go into the homes and they're going to execute people because that's what a surgical strike is. So this is very, very concerning to me. Now, you're saying, well, Americans would do this to Americans? Well, let's put yourself in the shoes or the combat boots of one of these RSOF guys, okay? It's 1 a.m., you get awakened from a good night's sleep, and they're told, grab your gear, you'll be operational in 20 minutes, you'll be on the helicopter flying to your target. You arrive at your target between 2:30 and 3 a.m. in the morning. You rappel in, and as you're on the helicopter approaching your target, you are given your mission. And Dave, you said, okay, you're going to go to this GPS location, and this is what you're going to do.
Dave, we got to hold that thought. We've got the top of the hour break here, folks. We're here with the Liberty Brothers radio show live with Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Stick with us, folks. With Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show. Been talking about Jade Helm 15, the red, blue lists, just all of it. I kind of cut you off there before the break because the music was coming on. So if you want to finish up with that train of thought, and we started talking about some very interesting subjects off air there, specifically if this were to go live, what we might be able to do. So why don't we continue on with that conversation, Dave?
Well, let me give people the absolute best scenario, and then I'll work my way to the worst. The best scenario is we do what 3 counties in Texas did, and you raise so much heck that Jade Helm decides it's not worth it, they pull back. And if we did that collectively across the country, then they'd be forced to pull back. And for a short period of time, we would be safer. Now, of course, would they come back and try to invent a new way to subjugate us? Oh, absolutely. But, another day you live in pure freedom is a good day. So that's your best case scenario. This is why I'm continuing to stay on the Jade Helm thing. There's things I'd like to be writing about other than Jade Helm and Jade Helm-related activities. But right now I feel that our nation is at stake. And I do feel that we could go into martial law, by this fall. And I'm not predicting it, but I can see the scenario where it could certainly happen. And once it starts, the only thing to stop it is civil war. So this is very, very preemptive and a whole lot less bloody to raise as much hell as I possibly can in a public venue so we can push this back. Now, the worst case scenario is that what I believe will happen, and I was mentioning this before the break, the S&P is in the toilet, the BDI is at an all-time low, the Baltic Dry Index, which is really the best indicator of economics on the planet. We're in trouble. The economy is ready to collapse. We had 6,000 retail outlets closed in the last week, some of the major retailers like Target. So when we look at all this, it has one picture, economic collapse. And then, the elite know it too. So if you think this is just connecting dots in a wrongful way, consider that on November 10th, the Federal Reserve, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Janet Yellen, the head of the Federal Reserve, Mark Carney, the head of the Bank of England, and a bunch of English officials got together in London, and they practiced for widespread bank failure. That was November 10th of 2014. 6 days later in Brisbane, Australia, the elite at the G20 conference said that this is when they declared that your bank account's no longer money and you're an unsecured depositor, which means in terms of reparation for lost accounts, you'd go to the bottom of the pile, and the people that hold the debt on the credit swap derivatives, which totals now about $1.5 quadrillion, they're ahead of you. You'll never see a dime. And they're going to do the bank bail-ins first, which we've seen in Greece and we've seen in Cyprus and Italy and Spain, where they're going to take a certain percentage, if not all of it, out of your bank account. The CCA, which is the Circuit Court of Appeals, 8th District, has ruled that once you put your money in the bank, it belongs to the bank. It's a court ruling now. It's the law of the land. So therefore, they've got us, and they're planning to strip us of our assets. MERS, which is the home mortgage fraud situation, which has stolen over 13 million homes because they sell the notes so many times over, you don't know which mortgage company to pay, and then they come in with fraudulent notes and steal your home from you. The MERS fraud is back on the rise again after a brief respite. So these people are attempting to garner all the hard assets they can before the collapse. The collapse is coming. You see it with elite planning, and you also see it with economic indicators. When we have the BDI goes much lower, that means product's not moving. Let me walk through the stair-step chain of dominoes it's going to fall. When product isn't moved, you don't need truckers. Truckers go out of business. When truckers go out of business, they don't carry secondary loads like food. Intercontinental food, interstate trafficking for food. They're not carrying that. Pretty soon, you're going to start to see spot food shortages. And then when the bottom begins to fall out of the economy, nothing is going to be moving. You're going to have absolute food riots in your metropolitan areas. People will be begging for martial law. In fact, what did Henry Kissinger say? That people would be outraged if they knew the UN was in the country, but someday they'll beg for it. Well, this is what he's talking about. This is how martial law will be ushered in. And then we have already had one ISIS incursion at the Geller event, the Drawah Muhammad Prophet Day. And we had two ISIS people basically try to kill 75 people at an event. Thank God for a cop that could shoot straight. So ISIS will come across the border. They're well-armed. They're well-trained. They've been trained by forces that train the Mexican drug cartels outside San Salvador, and they're being trained with Muslim Brotherhood money. And so ISIS is very well-equipped. ISIS is very well-trained. They're not capable of meeting the American military in the open battlefield and winning, but they sure can make a long night or a long week of siege in small communities. They can attack police forces, assassinate mayors. I believe this is what you're going to see. Now, what do I base this on? Well, I started investigating the Walmart closings across the country, particularly the one that caught my attention was in Midland, Texas. And I had a lot of sources come forward in Midland and give me inside information, but the best source were two police officers. One was a Texas Ranger, one was a Dallas police officer very high up. They both told me the same story independently of each other. I said, do you think that the Walmarts are about FEMA camp processing? And both of them said no. Walmart logistically went on a military plan of logistical operations to match the military several years ago. I believe they did it, if memory serves me correctly, the first year that Janet Napolitano was DHS director. So they have military logistics. They are closing these Walmarts to arm them to the teeth for supply. Supply against who? I asked these two guys independently of each other, and they said ISIS, and other fifth column invaders that will come across our southern border. We are bracing all hell to break loose. Now, what's interesting is I put this into writing on my website. Oh, the Texas Rangers as an organization went crazy. Total denial, like they're going to admit that a whistleblower would ever say this anyway. And what's that saying? That I think thou doth protest too loudly?
Right.
And I think this is what we're seeing. And also, at that same time, I know I hit a nerve because NPR really came after me. They didn't mention me by name, but they put several hypertext links in an article they wrote derisively about statements I'd made, and it linked back to my article. Now, I want to thank NPR publicly for doing that, because in 2 days they put 30,000 new viewers on my website Some of these people have stayed on, and now they're reading my website. They're listening to my radio show. So thank you, NPR.
Well, David, that's I got to say that any press is good press at this point, and any time that we're attacked, whether it's Right Wing Watch or the SPLC, whatnot, talking about how we're a liberty movement, we always get massive hits, and those numbers stick with us over time. I think you're absolutely right, and you're over target when you're getting that flack, when you're getting shot at. You've hit onto something. So yeah.
Well, I'll give you another one. I'll give you two more. KHOU-TV in Houston. They showed my website as the narrator. The newsman made the following statement on their nightly news. He said, one blogger even claims that Americans are being slaughtered in death domes. I never said anything close to that. I never said anyone's being slaughtered anywhere. In fact, that's not happening at the present moment. And that was just an attempt to basically smear. And so I was on a Fox station last Friday, the Kate Daly show up in Utah. It's surprising to me that Fox would have me on, but I love Kate. I mean, Kate is a tremendous host. It's the second time I've been on her show. They called me up Thursday night and said, Dave, can you come on tomorrow? And I had a really full schedule, but we were able to work out 40 minutes. So I come on and I'm talking about Jade Helm, and I get to ISIS, I'm cut off. They try to call me back. They get me back in about 3 minutes. So we're talking along, and I return to the ISIS topic, and I get cut off again. And this is on my website, thecommonsenseshow.com. You can go up there and see it's on the front page and pull it up and listen to it. This time I was gone for probably 6, 7, 8 minutes. What's interesting and unknown to me at this time, they tried to call me on my cell. They tried to email me. And I didn't realize that my email and my cell phone had been taken down, and had stayed down until after midnight. Doug Hagman contacted me during the interview by email and wanted me to come on his show that evening. I did not see any of these communications until they popped up at 1 a.m. And I did not know my cell phone was down. In other words, here I'm on Fox telling a drive-home listening audience in their time zone, this is what your government's preparing to do to you, and I get knocked off the air twice, and then they take down my alternative points of communication. That's a pretty clear indicator that they're worried about what I'm saying.
Well, I got to say, Dave, that I've certainly experienced very similar things. I think when we've had you on before, we've had severe communication issues. When we had Steve Quayle on, different certain guests, someone talking about the CAF or whatnot, the communications definitely seem to be messed with in an attempt to stifle that communication. So I absolutely can verify what you're saying there, because we've experienced very similar situations.
Well, let's get to the $64 million question to this point. If you think you're on a red list or blue list, when they come in and get the red list people, let me tell you what I've learned about law enforcement. And this is really telling. There was a big deal made that South Carolina policemen participated with Jade Helm extraction drills. A big deal, man. It should have been. I mean, law enforcement should not be doing that. I mean, it's a violation of posse comitatus. But they did not do the extractions. Let me tell you what I've learned. When the red list group comes in and they go into neighborhoods and they infiltrate, police are going to be used to cordon off the neighborhood so no one in, no one out. That's how they're going to use local law enforcement. I've actually had that confirmed by private communications. In fact, actually, I published an anonymous email to that effect on my website today. So that's how they're going to use local law enforcement. Now, what that means, and I want everyone to hear this, you're not one of the red list people and they come and grabbed a few of your neighbors and they're gone and you're going, thank goodness, it's not me. Excuse me, they've already cordoned off your neighborhood. They're going to initiate martial law within 2 or 3 days. That's a typical pattern throughout history. It's also what I've been told is going to go down.
Wait, say that cut out a little bit. What is the big red flag that within 2 or 3 days it's going to happen?
In 2 to 3 days after red lists are acted upon, you're going to see martial law come into play.
Okay.
So the cordoning off that the police are going to do in support of the Jade Helm Red List Extraction Group, they're going to basically cordon off a neighborhood. That neighborhood's not just going to go back to normal when this is over. You know, within 2 or 3 days, you're going to have full-blown martial law. And it's going to be under the guise of an economic collapse. It's going to be under further guise of false flag attacks by ISIS. And the CIA is funding ISIS. I had Scott Bennett on my radio show like 2.5 weeks ago now, and Scott was Army Special Operations Forces officer, and he named names on Swiss bank accounts and who's in control of these accounts and how they're funding ISIS. I mean, it was probably the most stunning and probably dangerous interview I've ever done. I mean, I did look over my shoulder. I thought, wow, I wonder what's going to come to this. So it's a false flag attack. So this begs the question now. This is what all this leads up to. When should you realize you're in danger and drop everything and go dark and get the hell out of Dodge?
Especially if you're on that red list.
Well, even if you're on the blue list. You know, let me tell you, if people are listening to this audience and they go to our websites, they're writing comments on the web pages, they're calling into talk shows, there is a decent chance they're on a blue list relocation for education camps. You know, I think that anyone who's awake to what's going on has left enough of an NSA footprint that they'll be on some kind of extraction list long term to where, here, come get on the bus. You know, we're going to take you to a place where it's safe. Only it's going to be safe for them, not for you. So the point is here, let me get right to the heart of the matter now. When the economy falters, and I think a real marker for me is going to be when that first bank closes and they do a bank holiday. When they first do that, that's time that you cannot be where they can find you. I think any time after that, a week, a month, 3 months, they can come get you. And I can't put a time frame on it because we've never seen it in America. But I don't think they're going to wait real darn long. So I think that when chaos starts with the economy, I think that's when people need to look to be in an alternative place. And hiding out is not like it used to be. If you take your cell phone, you're dead meat. You're just dead meat. But it's not even if you just take your cell phone. Let me tell you how good the technology is, and I'll actually get into this in tomorrow's article in a whole lot more detail. But let me just give you an example of how easy it is to detect somebody. I'm in your kitchen, Jason, and you've decided to take me in, and it's not likely the authorities are going to trace me. You're not a family member. We've never worked together. We haven't spent a lot of time in proximity together because you got to be careful. If you go to a hideout where your cell phone has been within a 10-foot radius of someone else's cell phone, that's been recorded by the NSA, and that would be one of the places if they want to find you bad enough, they'd go look for that, get that person's place for you.
So that's like the metadata that they talk about.
Well, that's, yeah. Actually, this is a whole show in itself. But what I've been told is the NSA has a 16 subscale measure of a threat matrix for every American in the country, and one of the domains is known terrorist association. Remember, if you don't buy into the Kool-Aid drinking you should be doing, you're a terrorist. So if I'm hanging out with you and we're in the same area, okay, that drives our threat matrix score way up. You do not want to hang out with people who you've been in close proximity with, particularly in the recent past. So let's say that I'm in your, you and I have never had a cell phone close to each other. Let's say that for the sake of argument, I can make my way to you. You've got a cousin that I can stay with. That's pretty far removed now. It's going to be hard to trace me. But you and your cousin are in the kitchen one day, and I walk in, and I say something, and your cell phone's off. It doesn't matter. They have roving voice print inflections they take, and these supercomputers record everything. When your phone is in passive mode, it's recording everything around it. Now, humans aren't listening to this, but these computers are programmed through intricate software to stair-step the threat. And if they say, hey, Dave Hodges, how you doing? Bingo, they've got you right there. They know exactly where you're at. If they just say Dave, well, Dave might be uttered, maybe 150 million times in the course of the day. But if they backtrace, okay, where did it come from? You have the computers doing this logical reduction of information. They might be able to narrow it down to 30, 20, 10 places. But also they can get your voice print. If you speak, they've already got everyone's voice print. It's just like your thumbprint. So if you speak and you're in the vicinity of a landline, doesn't matter if it's on the hook, doesn't matter if your cell phone has the battery out of it, they have your voice print, they can match it to your location. So you have to have people who are smart enough not to even have open phones or even turned off phones, within earshot of where you're at. That could be very, very dangerous. And a lot of these newer cars, like the OnStar system and stuff like, you can't drive those cars to these locations. They know where you're at. That's worse than having your cell phone. So there's a lot of things to consider, and a lot of this stuff comes out of what the NSA and the FBI call the FAST system, that's F-A-S-T, and I'll be talking about that in tomorrow's article in a little more depth. But basically, the FBI brags, if you think you're going to go hide in the wilderness, we can come and find you.
Well, I mean, they've got the FLIR, they've got the infrared. There are certain ways to get around that, but you've got to have it prepared beforehand. And even then, I mean, how long would we realistically have to be, kind of off the grid, off the matrix, before this settles down? Is that actually a reality? Or, it sounds like it's going to change life for a lot of us as we know it. It's just not going to go back to the way it was.
No, but here's the good news. If you take in someone and try to hide them out, it's not going to be a long-term deal, because you got to look at what's coming. Okay, what's coming? What's led to you leaving? You're leaving because red list extractions are coming and blue list major population movements to FEMA camps are coming. Okay, when that starts, the military is going to make a choice. And a lot of the military, I don't know how much, 10%, 50%, 80%, but it doesn't matter. If a significant portion of the military and retired veterans or veterans who are no longer on active duty, they decide enough is enough, and they start to band together, you've got a civil war. Once the civil war starts, the red list search is going to be over, because you're no longer a high-value target. They're looking for people who can instigate trouble. That's what a red list is about.
The ones that are going to be instrumental in starting off that civil war.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But I'm telling you, this is where I think their thinking is flawed in Jade Helm. If I were an operations commander in the Pentagon, I'd be saying, you guys are just full of crap here. You're going after red list people who are going to go on the run. They're not going to play a role to a large extent on what's going to go on, but you're going to make so many people so mad, you're going to bring on the very thing that you're trying to avoid. And this is what I think Jade Helm is going to blow up in their face. Jade Helm will cause civil war. And once the civil war starts, red list, blue list don't matter anymore. Everyone's a frontline participant and you're a combatant.
Now, I've heard a lot of people saying that this could possibly happen this fall, September, October. You don't put any sort of time span on it, which is probably pretty smart, because you never know. I mean, just reaching enough people on alternative media can back them down, can make them change their schedule of events. It can have an impact. So, and these are things that I pray, Dave, we are wrong on this, because it's from everyone I've talked to, from Michael Snyder to James Wesley Rawls, to some of the top people out there. I mean, this is going to be the worst thing we've ever seen as a country, worse than the Civil War, worse than the Great Depression. And it just seems like it's well, there's no doubt it's being engineered. Just take the ISIS example here. We have intelligence that we've got known bases just miles over the border. There's intelligence out there that there are training camps in several states. There's an intelligence talking about how there are known ISIS members in every state in the Union. Yet we never hear about them being arrested or, taken into custody, disarmed. We always hear about now how it is the conservatives, it's the Christians, it's the gun owners and the veterans who are the real threat when we've got this manufactured. Granted, I believe it's manufactured. I think you're absolutely right on the CIA funding and starting it, but there's no doubt that there are people out there that want to take us down like ISIS, and they're already here. We've got an open border. Strategically, it would be stupid for them not to be here. Why do you think they've left them alone? I mean, obviously they're part of that end game plan, along with the implementation of that open border. How does the ISIS aspect, and then also the influx of the illegal immigrants from the southern border, how does that play into what's going to be happening?
Oh, first of all, the illegal immigrants is a smokescreen. The director of the FBI has said publicly that ISIS they have open cases on ISIS in 50 states. So that's a done deal. And the smoke screen are the illegals that come in, they come with them. And then you've got MS-13 that came in last summer. And who are they? They're the assassins for the Sinaloa drug cartel. They're the ones in Mexico that will kill the mayor of Tijuana or the city council or the chief of police. Well, we've got that fifth column force here in America. I had conversations with Border Patrol agents during the immigration crisis last summer who told me that they were not allowed to detain MS-13 for any length of time. They said, we maybe hold them a day, and we had to wait until there were 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, and then we'd release them together in bulk. And we were never allowed, and they had DHS overlooking this, they were never allowed to release MS-13 personnel with the rest of the population that was always with each other. So you had MS-13 cells actively being let into the country. And they're some of the biggest assassins in the world right now. They have. Let me backtrace this to just show you how serious this is with the threat that's already in the country. Okay, the Judicial Watch documents, what they did was they associated ISIS with the Sinaloa drug cartel. In fact, they even said that they used the Sinaloa coyotes to come into the country and scout high-value targets like educational institutions, nuclear facilities, and so forth. Well, who are the Sinaloas connected with? They're connected with a group called the Sanchez Paredes out of Peru. And it's basically the Peruvian army and a national bank that runs the world's biggest drug cartel. They took over after Pablo Escobar was assassinated in Colombia, and Colombia, drug trafficking went way down. Well, Peru picked it up. But see, Peru has very notable connections on the other side of the Atlantic. They are intimately involved with Hamas and Hezbollah, as is the Sinaloas. In fact, I have a 2006 and 2007 and a State Department memorandum, as well as a 2010 Tucson Police Department memorandum that say that Hamas and Hezbollah are involved with the Mexican drug cartels. So let's go back to the Sanchez Paredes in Peru. They are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood through their Hamas and Hezbollah connections. And what's interesting is kind of a side note, who runs arms and finance for the Muslim Brotherhood? Well, none other than the president's half-brother, Malik Obama, and I have a picture of them together on my website, and Obama has never disavowed his brother's actions. So you've got this big terrorist network here in which arms and drugs move across the ocean, and they come into Peru, and then they distribute all these arms to base camps outside San Salvador, in El Salvador. And this is where ISIS and the drug cartels are getting paramilitary training.
Dave?
With weapons like 50 caliber machine guns and handheld Stinger missiles.
Dave, we're at the 30-minute break. It's a shorter one, so we'll be right back, folks, on the other hour for the home stretch here on Liberty Brothers with Dave Hodges of The Common Sense Show, thecommonsenseshow.com. Be right back. Stick with us.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, and welcome back to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. We're here with Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show. Right before the break, we're on the home stretch now, so we'll get right to it. Boy, Dave, I could just talk to you. Time just flies by when we're talking about this stuff. There's so much important information to get out there. We were talking just before the break about ISIS, what was happening in South America, the weapons and the people that were being transferred and how. So let's finish up on that and keep going.
Well, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that when your FBI director, and I think he didn't get the memo. He actually thinks he's supposed to do his job. But ISIS is here by design, active cases in all 50 states, according to the FBI. And we have ISIS base camps connected to terrorists where they're doing sophisticated weapons training. By the way, you know how I found out about the San Salvador camp and the connection with the Sanchez Paredes? Went through my military sources. I got a off-the-record DEA source, and I think within a month he'll be coming public. He's had enough. And he's had up-close dealings with the Sanchez Paredes drug cartels, and he knows all too well their affiliations. And he and I are having a dialogue right now with parameters about what I can disclose And I have a feeling within a month he'll be coming public. I think he sees just how serious it's getting. But we have a well-armed insurgency force inside the United States. We have a paramilitary force, at least one of them that we know of, and there's probably more, just outside El Paso, Texas. I can see that they're going to be attacking malls and shopping centers and sporting events and, God forbid, schools. That's what I would do. I mean, if you got to think like your enemy. If you're ISIS, they cut the heads off Christian children. Do you think they're going to hesitate to machine gun down kids as they walk out of elementary schools? As horrible as that is to mention, it's even worse not to consider the possibility. And I can see battleground America, and this is exactly how it's going to go down. And under this confusion is when I said, again, the red list will start, and then very quickly they'll move to blue list relocations for people's safety, and the people that won't go willingly because they're afraid, they'll be forced to leave. And this is the time that we're going into. And we talk about, what about the future for our kids and stuff like this? If we can't turn this back, and I hope everyone's listening to these words I'm about to say, if we can't turn back Jade Helm through public pressure right now, your kids have no future. There is no America. This country will officially cease to exist. Our Constitution is already dead. We don't have a First Amendment. Go over there and stand in the free speech zone when you protest. And, you know what? We have it in FM 39.3 that we can execute you if you're a protester. I've got that in the article today. And Second Amendment? Well, we know how well that's going right now, and Obama will someday get his house to house. And when these red lists and blue lists come, that'll be de facto gun confiscation. Then we've got Fourth Amendment. That's been gone since the days of the TSA. You've got the Fifth Amendment due process. Well, that was done away with the NDAA when they can snatch you out of your home or off the street without due process of law. Then we got cruel and unusual punishment, violation of federalism principles, and the 10th Amendment. Should I go on? I mean, the Constitution is dead. America as we knew it is not the America that we grew up in. Your kids have no future if we can't push back Jade Helm. The only thing that we've got going for us right now is we are free to drive to work, free to drive to go out to eat, and free to associate with friends. That's about the only freedoms we have left. And when Jade Helm gets its clutches on us, or Jade Helm's successor, maybe it won't be Jade Helm, but they're sure as heck practicing for something. They're not wasting all this time, resources, effort, and material because they're not going to do this to us someday. Of course they're going to do it. Whether it's Jade Helm or Jade Helm 16 or Jade Helm 17, I can't say for sure. But if we let it get to that point, people, it's over. It's game over. We are Jews, and it's Nazi Germany time.
Wait, there's no doubt that they are gearing up. They're training for something very specific. You look at the posters that were brought by the Department of Homeland Security. They're not Middle Eastern terrorists. They're not ISIS-looking guys. They are, pregnant women in an American household. They're children holding a gun, dressed with American sports teams on their shirts. They're, old folks with John Deere tractor hats and overalls. This is very specific, folks, and it's before we had all these puzzle pieces, and we knew they played into this bigger part, but right now I really feel that we're seeing these puzzle pieces fall into place, and there really is no denying that it's happening before our eyes. And how are we going to be able to talk to our children and tell them, oh, you all right?
Yeah, I kind of lost you for a second.
Oh, are we just going to say, well, I didn't see it, or, that leads me to my bigger question, Dave, and that is, how can we stop this? How can we fight against this technocracy where they've got all these technological advances, they've got all this intelligence already gathered, they've got foreign forces, they've got the money, they're going to crash the economy, the food supplies, it's just going to be nightmarish. How do we begin to have an effect?
Well, that's a good fact is that they've retreated from Colorado and free states and Texas is a victory. But we can't gloat on that. We've got to expand our victory zone and totally get rid of Jade Helm, because Jade Helm is not in 7 states like they claimed. It's in all 50. So what do? Well, we do shows like this, and let me tell you what this accomplishes. It doesn't just, further embolden the people who are awake and they know what's going on, don't drink from the government Kool-Aid already. But there's a few people listening today who are hearing this for the first time, and they go, this sounds quite incredulous, but gee, I'm hearing Dave Hodges doing, somewhere between 7 to 10 interviews a week. He writes an article a day. He has his own radio show. Why is this lunatic devoting this much energy to this? Doesn't he have a life? But then it's not just Dave Hodges. It's you. It's Jim White. It's Steve Quayle. And they start looking at this and they go, there might be something to this, and it causes them to look. So we gain more converts. And this is really what we need to do. We need the strength of marching numbers. But let me tell you something else that we never talk about in the independent media. When we talk like this, guarantee you, family members of RSOF and RSOF themselves are hearing this. These Special Forces guys know what we're saying. And if we keep saying it over and over and over, and we stick to our convictions, and if just one day they go on a computer in the library because they don't want to be traced at home, and they click on a hypertext link from the Common Sense Show, and they go to it and goes, oh my God, this really is a document. This guy's right about this. You start planning out in the minions that they'll need to help carry out this stuff. The more noise we can make up front, the less committed of a force we will see from our own military, and the more likely they will defect. Our only chance in America, and we've lost the ballot box, we have is to hide behind the conversion of our military. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to save the people of this country from an unimaginable nightmare.
Wow. Let me ask you this, Dave. Do you think we're going to see a financial collapse first? Do you think it might be the riots? I mean, it seems to be there's so many things coming together, and I do think the riots play a part. There's no doubt that they are getting us ready for a summer of unrest. We've seen 2 already. We've got a verdict coming down in Cleveland today that people are preparing to do it for. We've seen it's being funded, and obviously Al Gore has spoken about needing our own Arab Spring here within the black community. How do the riots and that civil unrest play into everything? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I said before, economic collapse, failure for food to move because we live in a society that has 3,000-mile salads. Then you have food shortages. Then you have food riots. The stores will all be looted. And then they got to put on the street. They need to hide what they're doing inside some noise. So the economic collapse will come first. Now, they could take the economy down through, a cyber attack on the banks. I've considered that's possible because they've reversed this drill so many times. But I think that right now, the debt's just going to take its course, and I don't think we have much time. When people say we could be a martial law by September, I think it's possible because I think it's possible the economy could collapse before then. So the economy goes down, food riots, civil unrest, you have troops in the street. Now you have relocations because ISIS is the big threat. They're coming across the border. And you have other known fifth-column people. So you need to have refuges. And a lot of people don't know this, and I should probably mention this. In 2012, Homeland Security signed agreements with the National Hockey League, Football League, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and Simon Properties, which is the largest owner of malls and strip malls in North America, to serve as temporary shelters in times of national emergency. They'll be FEMA holding camps. They'll be re-education camps. They'll be the place that people will be steered towards to gain some measure of safety when all heck breaks loose. So we're really on the verge of seeing all these things happen. Now, what could cause it to stop? Well, if they felt that they were going to see 30 million Americans rise up and start shooting, in fact, let me tell you a quick story about a guy named Marlin, and his last name jumps out of my head. I'm going to interview him on my show. He had some Jade Helmers come up to his driveway and were snooping around his house pretending to be the power company. No notebooks, no briefcases, no anything. And they were in a clown suit, some kind of matching uniform clown suit. And Marlin went out with his gun and said, "What the hell are you doing?" He lives, rural area of Big Springs, Texas. And they said, "Well, we're here for your electric." He says, "No, you're not." He says, "I know who you boys are. You're Jade Helm. You've been to other homes in the area, scouting them out, looking to see what you can do." He chased them off. And I heard from a lady also from Big Springs on a farm who's a widow, and she went out. She found 2 guys in her backyard. And she went out and she goes, "What do you guys think you're doing?" She had a shotgun. and 68 years old and a widow. And they said, well, we're here for a gas leak. She goes, no, you're not. I know you people are from the government. Get off my property before I blow you away. She called the sheriff. And here's what's interesting. The sheriff said, well, B, you know that you should not be pulling guns on government officials. And she goes, well, number one, how do you know I had a gun? And number two, how do you know they were government officials? The point being this, is we're starting to see in heavily saturated areas that are already been inundated by Jade Helm activities, we're seeing people stand up. We could do this all across the country. If we keep the pressure on, if we keep, there's no interview that I'll turn down if I can work it into my schedule, because we need to keep the pressure on these people, because we need people like Marlon and like B to go out and say, get the hell off my property. This is America. Posse comitatus. You don't belong in my neighborhood. Get out of here. If they think they're going to meet this much resistance, they're going to back up. They're clearly going to back up.
Well, I certainly hope that's the case, and I encourage anyone to start doing their part. We're going to need everybody to help spread the word about what's going on and to try to back this down, because as Dave said, as I've said many times, this really is a nightmare possibility. And there's a lot of storms converging upon us. Dave, tell us a little bit about the show. We got about 10 minutes to sum up. If you got any great guests coming up, I want to encourage all of our listeners. I know that I read a lot of Dave's work on the air because I think he's really got his finger on the pulse of what's happening. And again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. But do you have any big guests, any shows? When can people catch it? I think there's been a time switch on your show. Let us know what's going on there.
Not yet. We got one more week where we come on at 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain. And that 1 week we're going to have Stuart Rhodes. And I'm still working on the second hour right now. The third hour we do Health Report and News. But in the second hour, we might be bringing on some people out of South Africa. I'm still working on this story, and they claim a white genocide is going on down there. And I actually wrote a story about this a little over a year ago. So we've got that coming up this week. But with Stuart Rhodes, I had dinner with Stuart about 10 days ago. And he was in Phoenix, and we went to a nice little restaurant north of Phoenix, and we had about a 3-hour conversation about Jade Helm. And we're going to share the contents of what we know. And for people who don't know, Stuart Rhodes is the head of Oath Keepers. In fact, I'm actually speaking up in northern Arizona this Saturday at the Oath Keepers Convention for Chino Valley, and it's just north of Prescott. So if you're up in that area, come in and come to the presentation and say hello to me. The following week, on the 31st of May, we make a 2-hour switch where we're going to be going 2 hours earlier in our show, and our first guest is Doug Hagman. So we couldn't start off with a much bigger splash. But Doug and I are going to compare notes. And Doug's running down a story today, and I've had a lot of people give me heat, and I wished I hadn't said it in the article now. I put in an article today that there are 15,000 UN troops in a military base in Texas. That was shared with me by Doug Hagman yesterday, and he's still vetting that. That's his story to release. And I wished I had mentioned, it was kind of an old by-the-way comment. I didn't elaborate on it. And people wanted more information. I said it'll be coming out soon. So Doug will be on the 31st. And we tend not to schedule any further out than about 2 weeks just because right now our situation is so fluid that I want to keep time slots open so I can bring in timely guests. But we feel right now we're kind of at the tip of the spear because the government's making their moves. And I say the government, I'm really saying the Obama administration on behalf of the globalists. They're making their move against us. The best way to listen to my show is simply go to my website and click on the Listen to Dave button, which is in the upper right-hand corner. And so we'll be there live. So we go from 9 to midnight Central for 1 more week, and then we're 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central, or 6 to 9 p.m. And what we were finding is our archives were like 10 times the listenership of our live show. And I raised that one time on the air, and my audience started writing to me. It's because we can't stay up that late, Dave. It's 1 a.m. when you go off the air on the East Coast. So we're trying to accommodate that part of the country. So we really feel that we're going to be able to reach more people and get the word out by making this time switch.
Well, I know I'll be able to listen to more of the show because of it. Yeah, Stuart Rhodes is great. He's a friend of the show. We've had him on probably more times than I can count. And, I'm very involved with Oath Keepers when things jump up from, starting at Bundy Ranch, went down there with Stuart, actually embedded with him, and spent a couple weeks down at Bundy Ranch with the Oath Keepers, and have gone to several other, including Sugar Pine Mine, covering kind of as a public information officer because they trust me to put out the information as I come across it. So, yeah, he's great. We've had him on specifically on the Jade Helm stuff. I'll be very interested to see what his updates are, so I'll definitely be listening to that show. Want to thank you again so much for coming on. I love it when you come on. It was great that you were able to co-host with me today. And, so thanks so much. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go?
Well, just to prove to the audience, we no longer can sit around and just discuss these events among ourselves. We've got to reach out to people where it might be uncomfortable to do so. And there is going to be the giggle factor because people are still dumb enough to watch Fox and CNN. But we've got to try to convert so many people per day because if we don't have numbers, we're going to get crushed. The only way that they're going to back away from us is if they feel they're going to meet with significant armed resistance. And we're nowhere near where we need to be right now. The social psychologists tell us that before a trend becomes a fad and it takes off, you have to have 10% of the followers that are really committed to an ideal. And we're not quite to that 10% factor yet. Once we get there, the liberty movement will spread like crazy. So we've got to all do our part. You don't have to have a radio show to even start a website. They're free. Or to tell your Aunt Bessie, hey, Annie, this is what's going on in the country right now. And people are going to laugh at you sometimes, but then there are going to be a lot of people that listen, and we need people to start listening and start acting.
It really is so important to put yourself out there in that way. I had a conversation with a gentleman last night trying to do just that, and he very much had that giggle effect, and basically boiled down to him saying, I really believe living in ignorance is bliss because this stuff is so extreme, but at the same time, I countered with, hey, you know what? If we're all a population of sheep, then the wolves take over.
Well,
and
let me just say this, okay? Ignorance is not going to be bliss.
No.
Because when they load you onto one bus and they put your kids on another and your wife on a third bus, and that's the last time you ever see your family, I wouldn't call that blissful.
No, that's a nightmare. And it's coming our way, except we won't be asleep. We can't wake up from it if we don't do something right now. So, all right, Dave, thanks so much for what you do. And thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you guys.
All right. Have a great day, Dave.
Thanks.
All right, folks. Well, that was Dave Hodges. And, again, I've been saying it, really, really been on my heart as of late with the financial collapse. Started with that because so many of the people I've been talking to, Michael Snyder, Joel Skousen, Gia Griffin, all these people that help wake me up, that I have the privilege and the honor of being able to talk to, be able to call up and pick their brain on things and, get their actual thoughts. And so many of them are talking about, these storms that are coming together right now. We really have got to understand we're living in historical times, and now is the time to start preparing for that, to just, do your part, whatever that part may be. If you've got a lead on a story that you think is going to blow the lid off things, well, you need to work on it too. Granted, I get a lot of people that give me leads on stories, and I look into them, and there's only so much I can do. There's only so many hours in a day. But if you've got it, well, then that's your responsibility too. You need to help get the word out. We all have a part to play, and we all need to be a part of this team because our children and our grandchildren, they don't have a future worth living in otherwise. Now is the time. Now is the time to get into fighting shape. Now is the time to get sharp mentally. Now is the time to try to wake up those friends and family members that think you're tinfoil hat crazy because it's the right thing to do, to put yourself out there and to do your part. And that doesn't mean, going out and having to go to Bunny Ranch, pick up a gun. Like I said, I go to these events and I bring a camera, I bring a microphone, because that's how I can do the most good. And we all need to look at what we can do to do the most good. We've got to come together and get past all of this race baiting and just how they're trying to fracture us as a country, keep us all separated and fighting amongst ourselves. We got to break through it. We got to come together, because, you know, if we don't hang together, we all surely hang separately. And that is, it's just as true today as it was when it was first said. So probably even more so. All right, folks, that's the show for today. Go do your part. Figure it out. Listen to LibertyBrothers.com. Visit us at libertybrothers.com. I'm Jason Van Tatenhove. I'll be back tomorrow.